It's my lineup review for week one in the $1,500 entry small field GPP on DraftKings, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Welcome to another daily fantasy sports video. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DFS player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel and make sure you click that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. And if you're already a Holkamaniac, you know exactly what time it is. Smash that like button and we'll get rolling. This is kind of how it looked for a lot of lineups that we saw towards the top half, but it was interesting in a small field like this. Again, $1,500 buy-in, only 72 people in this one, so it did fill. You can't really see it. My webcam's in the way, but 25K up top, nearly a 2x mint multiplier, which is nice, but pretty flat, relatively flat throughout this. I do wish that they could make it a little bit more flat, but what can you do? It's still pretty good. 25K up top is really solid for a tournament of this size. But what I like about it the most is just that it is a single entry, but also that we get a lot of really sharp people in this tournament in particular. So it's kind of fun to go through these lineups and actually see what others were doing. Straight Cash Homie actually vaulted up the leaderboard in overtime. So his Kyler Murray to Larry Fitzgerald stack was absolutely crucial for him in actually making it all the way up top. Also was a big part of what dropped me in this one. I was actually sitting in first place most of the day, anywhere between first and third throughout the afternoon, and actually got passed by two things happened. 49ers defense happened, which we'll talk about, 27 points at 2,200. We talked about them on the live stream on Sunday morning as well. They were my favorite cheap defense to take a look at, but I didn't end up going there for a couple of reasons. I thought the ownership would be not out of hand, but anytime an owner kind of a defense approaches like this 22% mark, especially in a field size like this, I was a little bit kind of off it at that point. I think that a defense, especially in the beginning of the year, is not one of the positions that I want to kind of hold hands. So I was kind of a little bit surprised to see it be that high, but I knew it would be higher at higher stakes. So for kind of a comparison there, and I'll keep kind of giving you guys parallels to the Millionaire Maker as well. Obviously, one of the larger field contests there is. The San Francisco 49ers are only 4.3% owned in the Millie Maker, but in the 1K, 22.2% owned. They're 1.5K rather. So huge difference. Anytime you see that, more often than not, means that it was a pretty sharp play. So I hope most of you guys that were here kind of got on that, at least the guys that were on the Twitch stream, because I definitely considered them. If I would have needed the salary with my current build, that would have been the direction I went if I would have went super cheap. But Straight Cash Homie, obviously that was a huge part for him. Some chalky plays in here, guys, and these smaller field GPPs in particular, it doesn't matter what stakes you're at, you don't have to really get too crazy. I've talked about it before, but my kind of strategy with this is to basically build what I think is optimal and then do either a slight roster construction type pivot, maybe different type of correlation, or get a little bit weird at one of the positions that I think is a little bit more volatile. So yeah, Trevor in the chat asking what defense I ended up going to. We'll walk through my lineup here shortly. I still feel pretty good about the thought process, even in hindsight. 2020, his lineup had 221 split across a bunch of different contests. Yeah, so that's a great score, man. 221. I mean, you can't really look at these contests and just be like, what if I would have put my lineup in this? Obviously, you could go the other way some weeks too. Terrible lineup, and then you just end up overexposed to a tournament that's outside your bankroll. It's tough. I actually had the same thing happen 2 years ago, actually, in the playoff weeks. I ended up having a team that won a bunch of small field stuff. Some of you guys that have been with us for a while will know this story, but didn't have it in the Wildcat, had it in the smaller Wildcat. Actually would have won the larger Wildcat, which was obviously pretty frustrating. But you can't honestly, for me at least, I just go crazy if I start to look at some of these other contests that I might have won. So I guess would rather not. As long as I have my team in the Millie, I'm fine with that. I'm just kind of not paying attention to some of the ones in between. Denver said he loved Fitz at his price tag on both sites, couldn't pull the trigger. Same with Gallup. Yeah, we talked about Gallup quite a bit on the stream as well. I thought that he was a really interesting pivot off of some of these other guys in that same range, D.D. Westbrook, Curtis Samuel. I did like Gallup quite a bit, and we'll talk about one of the mistakes I think I made with my lineup when we get there. But I easily could have gone the direction of kind of getting a wide receiver or one of the other positions in the later games, and didn't really give myself any flexibility whatsoever, which was definitely a mistake. We'll talk about that. Hess is asking what my stream schedule is now that football is back. Yeah, so things are still kind of a moving target at this point. Definitely, if you guys have any feedback on which days and which times are best, I'll try and do my best during the week to stream right after Manny. M. Laura, he's probably still live right now, but he goes on every day at noon Eastern time, so I'm probably going to go on around 1 Eastern time. During the week, probably going to have a stream on Wednesdays as well. Probably going to have a special guest for those, which will be great. I can't say the complete details on that yet, but Wednesdays are going to be a lot of fun. Thursday mornings, it might end up being that same stream. It's either Wednesday or Thursday for that midweek stream. I also filmed the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast on Thursday morning, so we're going to try and figure out the timing of that. And then I will be live on Twitch on Sunday mornings at 11:30 Eastern time. So that's kind of the schedule for that. We'll have some more YouTube videos basically every day as well, and then obviously the Instagram a couple times a day. It's different content on each platform, right? So that's kind of what we're going for. How long did you play for the Vs? Oh yeah, Penticton Vs, as you can see back here. Played junior hockey in Canada for 3 years right after high school, and then I ended up going to St. Cloud State in Minnesota. So I was in Penticton. So I was in Penticton from 2008. 2009, and 2010. Those are the 3 seasons I was there. Yeah. The Winston Evans attack killed my lineup. Yeah, we'll talk about Tampa Bay. That definitely hurt a lot of people. But the reason that we talked about the 49ers too was, I'm not saying that was exactly the reason. Winston's definitely shown his ability to kind of blow up at times. But the offensive line is not good in Tampa Bay. And for the kind of offense they want to run, getting downfield with Bruce Arians' system, they need protection, right? So this is the kind of thing that can happen with someone like Winston when he's feeling pressure. And we did think that the 49ers would get there. It's always tough to play a road defense, a defense that's clearly an underdog in the game. So it's a little bit harder to pull the trigger if they weren't as cheap as they were, but we were looking for passing volume, and we knew we were going to get that from Winston. So that was kind of the thought process there. And that's why a lot of people got there. So, I mean, I think that's just crazy looking at that they were only 4% in the Millie Maker, 22% in this tournament. So that's super interesting. Yes, I did stay at a Holiday Inn. That might be one of the best Twitch names I've ever seen. Thanks for being with us, man. All right, so let's walk through the rest of this team. So he did have that, like I mentioned, he had the Kyler Murray to Larry Fitzgerald stack, which ended up being super sharp. I wasn't on Fitz in particular, but it made a ton of sense, right? At 4,900, he wasn't that. I mean, from an upside perspective, I didn't see this coming. Obviously, 100-yard bonus game, 8 receptions, did add a touchdown, obviously as well. Yeah, I saw the upside from a lot of other guys in that range, but getting that at 4%, I know a lot of really sharp, high stakes guys were on Kyler Murray even in cash games this week, which I didn't so much consider against Detroit. But we know that there's going to be a certain amount of rushing floor from Kyler Murray, only 13 rush yards on the ground. I think that's probably his floor for sure. But I do think that we're going to see this guy have some big games just because of how many plays they're going to run in Arizona. Didn't think that it'd be this week. For the people that didn't fall into that, it obviously worked out for them. So at running back, Dalvin Cook, just massive chalk, 62.5% in the 1,500. If we're just looking at the Millionaire Maker, he was the highest owned player, but only 37% there. So almost double the ownership in this contest as well. So again, some of the players kind of at the higher stakes, you'll see there's more condensed ownership on some of the quote unquote best plays. You can use that in a lot of different ways. You can use that to leverage a lot differently in this contest. This is the one that I'm putting the most of my focus on. So someone like that, Dalvin Cook, I think that he was a great play. Obviously, I was at the game in Minnesota. I got to see that one firsthand. Them just throw 10 times. Not the best product to watch live, but definitely was nice as a Dalvin Cook owner. Christian McCaffrey, love that play. I had Christian McCaffrey as well. Don't really need to say much about that. Just he's a threat to hit the double bonus every single week. Just his role is completely insane. And if people did kind of think they could just get by with the running backs we had in the mid-range and didn't want to pay all the way from Christian McCaffrey, that was something that I wanted to take advantage of, which we'll talk about. 20% in this tournament. Christian McCaffrey right at 20% in the Millie Maker as well. Loved the Adam Thielen call. Obviously, he played Dalvin and Thielen together without Cousins, which is totally fine. Talked about how they were totally fine to pair together. We talked about that on the stream as well. The Thielen people probably got bailed out a little bit, to be completely honest. Like, I mean, there was only 10 pass attempts in this game. He did get a touchdown, 3 catches. At 26.4%, I thought he made a decent fade at that price, 6,800. So I'll talk about that in a little bit too. Delaney Walker at 5.6. I do think it's a position we're trying to get a little bit different, make some sense, more volatility there. Nick Chubb at 27.8%. So I loved Chubb. There's no chance I was playing him on my only team because I only played one team on DraftKings this week. I just don't feel great about the safety of a guy that, yeah, we saw him use in the passing game towards the end of last year, but that's something where I still wanted to see a little bit more. If you were choosing between Dalvin Cook and Nick Chubb, super easy decision for me. So I was fine with that fade for some other reasons as well, which we'll talk about on my lineup. But yeah, I mean, obviously didn't kill him at that price point, but really solid team in general from straight cash homies, like a lot of the plays he made, especially the Tyler Boyd play, just in this range. You knew you were going to get secure volume. 5,800 was kind of a no man's land at wide receiver for me. You should show the last place team at the end. Yeah, we're not going to troll anyone, but maybe we'll take a look. I would imagine the last place team is probably a game stack that just didn't work out. You don't see a lot of just like really egregious plays in this tournament, to be completely honest. Yeah, Hess says literally double bonus every week. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at with Christian McCaffrey these days. It's just completely absurd. His price, I think these elite running backs, 8,800. I just think they're, quite frankly, I think they're underpriced by about 1,000 at least. So let's talk about my lineup. By the way, guys, if you've ever found value in any of my videos or live streams, one of the best ways to support what I'm doing here for free is to throw me the follow over on Twitter. And if you're new to the community, I also do a ton of content exclusive to Instagram and LinkedIn. So if you could just take a few seconds and follow me over there as well, I'd really appreciate it. I went with Josh Allen to John Brown. Talked about that stack on the Sunday morning stream as well. Again, 11:30 Eastern time every week this year. John Brown was someone that I just think he fits so perfectly with Josh Allen's skill set, right? So if we were going to get them at a lower ownership, which was what I was hoping for, if we did connect on a long bomb, it was going to be huge. And it was huge for this lineup. Josh Allen got off to a bit of a slow start. It was honestly the only thing that was holding this team back for most of the day, was just how poorly Josh Allen was playing. He was actually moving the ball fine. He just wasn't really finishing those drives, and he was turning the ball over. So that was what I started with. As far as that's one thing I do like to do in this tournament is try and get a lower owned but cheaper upside stack, right? So Josh Allen to John Brown did that for me. At running back, talked about Christian McCaffrey, talked about Dalvin Cook. Those guys were locks for me. Leonard Fournette. So I toyed around with this last running back spot quite a bit. I'll tell you some guys that I didn't have. I didn't have Chris Carson. I did not expect him to be as active in the passing game as he was. They have talked about throughout the offseason how he is very capable of being a pass catching running back and how he's one of the best pass catchers they have as a team. So maybe I should have at least considered the possibility that he would have been used a little bit more frequently. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily on that. If we're just looking specifically at targets for running backs this week, Christian McCaffrey, 11, Chris Thompson, 10, Le'Veon Bell, 9, Burkhead, 8, David Johnson, 7. If we scroll down a little bit more, Chris Carson had the same amount of targets as Austin Eckler at 7, same amount of targets as James White, and one more target than Saquon Barkley. So maybe that was a little bit of a mistake. We know how much the Seattle wants to run. But I decided to go with Leonard Fournette. He did touch the ball a decent amount of times on the ground, but the guy, he's still like the whole reason that I thought he was more in play than Carson is because he has been more active in the preseason in the passing game, 6 targets. So he didn't really do a ton, but 4 catches at 28 yards on the ground. I love that. Didn't end up having a massive game, obviously fumbled, didn't get in the end zone. But guys, 50% owned in this tournament. Nowhere near that in the Millie Maker. 25% owned in the Millie Maker. So half the teams in this small field, 72 teams, had Leonard Fournette. So I don't feel completely terrible about that play. Obviously, it was one of the ones that didn't work out. So basically, had my running back core, had my kind of lower owned upside stack. And one thing that I like to do at tight end specifically. So let's talk about Travis Kelce quickly, and then I'll get to your question, Hess. So Travis Kelce, loved him, loved Kittle, messed around with lineups with both of them. Also moved all the way down and was messing around with some cheaper tight ends as well. Actually had a Vernon Davis team for a little bit of my morning just because I like the upside there if Jordan Reed wasn't going to be a factor in the game, one of those two things. But I do like the state of the tails at tight end. So I like to either pay all the way up for these guys that have insane roles or pay down and be able to pay up, obviously, at running back or at one of my wide receiver spots. So I ended up liking the Travis Kelce play because from a game script perspective, if for some reason the Jacksonville kept it close, I still did like Leonard Fournette quite a bit. I just wanted access to this game, right? This KC and Jacksonville game. So Kelce and Fournette together, had a bunch of teams that had Fournette, D.D. Westbrook, and Kelce. Same kind of thought process there. A little mini stack is something that I like to do quite a bit in this tournament. So do like that the Travis Kelce thing at 19%. I don't know if we'll get him around that most of the year. He was only 13% in the Millie Maker, which was surprising to me. Things were pretty spread out at tight end in the Millie Maker, though. Hunter Henry was the highest owned tight end in the Millie Maker. So Hunter Henry was 16.4%. So really wasn't a massive standout chalk tight end this week. But I did like Henry quite a bit. I think he was the clear guy in the mid-range if you didn't go all the way down. But that is something that I'm trying to prioritize doing this year, is either paying up or all the way down. So my Eckler take has, Eckler wasn't someone that I was considering. He's not really my type of play. I want these guys, like the running back position and my running back slots are just so important to me, just because of how much upside and floor you're giving up if you decide to pay down at one of those. I didn't expect him to have as big of a role as he did. I thought Jackson would kind of take over some of those touches for sure. But yeah, honestly, that I was kind of wrong there. Eckler ended up with 12 rushing attempts, which was fine. Punched one in the end zone, 58 yards on the ground. But if we're just talking specifically about targets, Eckler 7 targets too. So 7 targets, 12 touches on the ground. Like that's not typically what I'm after. Obviously, it worked out for the people that went to him with the 2 touchdowns, but yeah, not my kind of play. Is it a specific tournament you don't feel the need to bring it back with another play, Joe, or do you usually just go QB, wide receiver stack? Yeah, it's week to week. Yeah, Crowder would have been a nice play to kind of move back with that. The same way that I feel about running back with kind of building in floor and upside, I also really take seriously my wide receiver slot. So yeah, in hindsight, maybe mix out a guy like Curtis Samuel and bring it back on the other side of the Josh Allen game. I wasn't actively trying to get access to that game. I didn't think that it was like one of the best spots on the slate by any means. I just love Josh Allen, just his rushing floor, but also his ability to throw deep. I thought it was a really nice kind of low-owned correlation. I don't think you have to completely game stack in this tournament. It's small enough to where I don't think it's completely necessary, but that was kind of my thought process there. Saquon thoughts. DFS Donuts, what's up, Holka? How you doing, man? Thanks for being back in here. Yeah, so Saquon. I'm nervous about Saquon because this team is going to be so bad this year that, I mean, you're paying a premium for probably, like 3 quarters in a lot of games. Like, they were only down by, I think, 20 points or something, and you already see a guy like Gallman come in. That makes me nervous. I love Saquon. Like, Saquon's one of my guys. I'll play him a decent amount this year for sure in games where I think that the Giants aren't going to get blown out. I just don't know how often that's going to be. Or maybe his price point will get to a point where it makes some sense. I'm nervous about Saquon. His volume should be there, but 3 quarters, that's a lot. That's a hefty price tag. But I considered him. There's tons of lineups I built without Leonard Fournette that actually had Saquon as well to try and go really cheap at wide receiver. I ended up going with some of these higher upside, low 8 or high ADOT type plays. So that brings me to Deshaun Jackson. So 4.2%. One thing that I really wanted to do was pivot off of Godwin, pivot off of Dede. It's not that I thought those guys were not good plays. I thought they were fantastic plays. I recommended them on every single show that I was on last week. But week 1, the wide receiver position is one where I did want to get a little bit weird. I didn't want to hold hands as much with everyone else. So love Dede. I play Dede probably more than most people just because I think he's a really talented route runner, and I think that talent matters at wide receiver. Deshaun Jackson, past the revenge game factor. So Washington, obviously, a little bit of a revenge narrative there. But at 4,500, I thought he was like the perfect price pivot from some of these other more, not so much Godwin, obviously. He was a lot more expensive. But if you were looking at kind of the Curtis Samuel to Dede Westbrook range, even kind of maybe throw Tyler Lockett a little bit more expensive, those guys were the ones that were super popular. I didn't want to end up playing all of those guys, if that makes sense. I wanted to find a way to get different at wide receiver with a really high upside play. So that's what Deshaun Jackson was for me. You just heard Carson Wentz talking about how excited he was to play with Djax because he can just run into basically any throw. And Wentz has an arm on him. A lot of people loved Wentz, really high total over there as well as far as the team total. So if kind of we ended up getting Deshaun Jackson loose on a couple of default, I thought he was going to see 6 to 7 targets, right? And 6 to 7 targets for Deshaun Jackson, those are super valuable targets because they're so deep down the field. So I was thrilled. Yeah, Trevor in the chat, 4% Djax. Yeah, I was thrilled to get Djax at that ownership. To be completely honest, I opened that. That was one of the things I was the most excited about with this team. So that brings me to Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel, he kind of fit with the build that I wanted. Couldn't quite get up to someone like Dede, though maybe it would have made more sense to go to Dede and then pay down a defense. I messed around with that as well. But Curtis Samuel, I probably underestimated his floor. And then, again, that was probably a mistake, even just taking the results out of it. Probably would have made sense, and the person asking about correlation earlier, would have made sense to make Dede work with this team, most likely, just to get the Kelce and Fournette exposure as well. But having a pass catcher in that game that I did like, that game environment, Curtis Samuel and McCaffrey together, yeah, maybe they cannibalize each other a little bit, but I still think that they were totally fine given Samuel's price. The Browns. So the Browns defense, I thought, was one of the best contrarian type defenses on the slate. I do a lot of work with offensive line versus defensive line play. Anyone that's been with us last year that gets access to my data sheet, I rank those situations every week. I had the Browns against the Tennessee offensive line, given the injuries that they had, as the best matchup on paper. So Cleveland was a big home favorite. I also prioritized game environment for sure from that perspective. I thought that the Tennessee was going to get behind. Obviously, they did not. Tennessee 43, Cleveland 13, hashtag Browns. But yeah, I loved the idea of getting access to the Browns at a lower ownership percentage, right? So if I messed around with 49ers teams, of course, like I mentioned before. And if that would have happened, I probably would have ended up in a much better position than I did, clearly. 27 points versus taking a 0 at defense, especially a defense where I paid 3,400. It stings for sure. So that's a big mistake, but probably a hindsight mistake. I still think that the thought process there was totally fine. Another position where you don't really want to hold hands with people, especially in these type of top-heavy tournaments. So when I saw 22% 49ers, I was actually pretty pumped because I thought that made a great fade. Anytime you can fade the highest owned defense on a slate, I think that's something you have to at least consider. So the Browns defense, 6.9%, was totally fine with that. And that's what happened, guys. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about quickly, too, is I didn't give myself any late swap flexibility. So I mentioned I was messing around with that last wide receiver slot, some defense stuff with this build pretty late, and still considering Travis Kelce versus Kittle. I think that it's always a mistake in a tournament like this to not leave yourself some late swap equity, because if you're trying to get to the top, if you're way behind, you can really just blow it up and really give yourself a chance with some lower owned plays. I thought my team was different enough with guys like John Brown, Josh Allen, and Deshaun Jackson that it may not have mattered. But moving forward, I wouldn't do that again. There's nothing like being in first place of this tournament, right, after the morning games, and just knowing you don't have much of a chance to hold on to the first spot. So that's never fun to just watch your winnings go down in that way. But even so, even those mistakes, still probably would have held on to second, third place, something like that, just because of how far ahead I was at that time. But that overtime game really killed me. And then if the 49ers even have just a reasonable day, even if they just score 15 points or so, probably end up in the top 3, top 4 of this tournament. Sure, it's great to cash week 1. Cashing for 4K, 7th place, definitely not complaining in that way whatsoever. It's a long season. I will say, too, that one thing that I always prioritize in NFL is really trying to stick with one strategy, right? So I have a strategy for the entire 20-week season. I'll include the playoffs. So my strategy is to attack these smaller fields at the higher stakes. This is something that even if you're not playing the mid stakes, I think that attacking these field sizes is something that is you're going to give yourself a better chance to win when you don't have to beat as many people. I made some mistakes here, sure, but also gave myself the out of, if I made a couple of nice plays, that I could still pass enough people to make it meaningful, even if I didn't have some of these guys. I didn't have Sammy Watkins. It doesn't mean that I was just completely out of winning this tournament. You know what I mean? So you're never going to win the Millionaire Maker without Sammy Watkins. So that's something that's interesting. Has 3 running backs in this tournament with your style of play with a high floor ceiling combo, running backs being priority. Yeah, I always play a running back in the flex. I was going to say almost, but no. In NFL, I always play a running back in the flex because I'm trying to reduce downside in a lot of ways too. And the running back position is the easiest to project touches. Volume is king at that position, sure. Getting a little bit of Christian McCaffrey skill involved, that matters for sure. But you're really limiting, I think, what you can control if you aren't spending up at the running back slots. There'll be weeks where you guys see this lineup on a Monday and you're like, wow, he really just went all out at running back and just punted the rest of the way. Fine with that, because on the weeks like this where I get upside from my wide receivers, Deshaun Jackson, John Brown at low ownership, and I hit on a couple of these high ADOT plays, I'm really glad that this week happened like this in general, because it's going to give you guys an idea of my overall strategy. Maybe you mix in one guy you think is a little bit safer. This one blew up in my face with Curtis Samuel, but I want upside with these cheaper plays as well, so that if I feel pretty good about hitting on running backs in most weeks, the weeks where I actually get spikes at my other position that I don't have to pay a premium from, I'm going to take down some of these tournaments. So I feel pretty good about that. Trevor's saying it's crazy how people still waste money on the Millie Maker instead of these contests. 300. Yeah, so I mean, you have to be perfect to win the Millie Maker. And I'm not even throwing shade at anyone that's ever won it. Actually, completely opposite. I think it's completely one of the more impressive things that you can do. But the sharpest teams don't always win those tournaments. I want to put myself in a position where if I'm putting sharp plays out there and actually thinking through leverage, thinking through late swaps, that sort of thing, that I can benefit the most. I don't necessarily think that my play style would work in the Millie Maker as well. Like maybe it would. I always throw this team in the Millie Maker just in case, of course. But I do think that in general, like going for these smaller fields is a way to build your bankroll in today's environment in NFL for sure, in NFL DFS. Did you ever consider Evan Ingram? Yeah, so it's such a tight kind of market share of targets in New York now with Saquon. Obviously, he's going to get his, but I loved Ingram in that mid range. There were some very sharp people that played him. He wasn't kind of in my final kind of tier list. I actually had some interest in OJ Howard as well. I felt like I was super light on that Tampa Bay game. I ended up getting a little bit lucky there for sure, because just like a lot of people, I was high on that game for pace for sure. But yeah, no, I think that Evan Ingram was fine in that range. It was just kind of a no man's land as far as price for me. Millie Maker wasn't even optimized. He had Carson in the running back slot instead of a flex. Interesting. Yeah, always put the late guy in your flex. It's a mistake everyone's made, though. You can't even like really get too mad at someone for doing that. It's just kind of funny that it was the Millie Maker winner. Just a reminder, if you're looking to invest in yourself and take your game to that next level, I go live every Sunday morning at 11:30 Eastern time for some Q&A before kickoff. Just make sure you're taking advantage of those live streams on Twitch. And if you have an Amazon Prime account, you actually automatically have access to a free Twitch Prime subscription. So with that, you get access to my premium Discord chat as well as a bunch of other subscriber-only perks. And regardless, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not getting involved in the community, and especially hanging out with us on Sunday mornings live. So follow me at twitch.tv/Joe Holka so you don't miss anything. Let's take a look at Jeff El Jefe's team. Always kind of respect what his thought process on a lot of things, honestly, but in particular these GPPs. I'm always kind of curious what his process is. So paying all the way down, I think almost any, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts or really consume a lot of that type of content, but the few that I do to kind of get an idea about ownership, pretty much everyone said, yeah, you don't really need the salary to play Jacoby Brissett this week. 4,400. He's like, oh, any other week that would make a lot of sense. This week we don't need it. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, what kind of teams can I build with Jacoby Brissett at 5.6%? I love that play from Jeff. So similar thought process probably with Josh Allen. Just get a lower owned type player like that. Certainly makes a ton of sense. Love that play. He did go with the same running backs as far as Fournette and McCaffrey. He did go with Carson. Some sharp play, obviously. A lot of smart people. I'm not sure if they necessarily saw 6 receptions coming, but the volume there certainly was something that was going to be there regardless. So this is a prime Jeff El Jefe lineup, right? So he's not afraid to play some of the chalkier running backs. He shouldn't be completely. I totally agree with that. Gets a little bit different at quarterback, allowed him pretty much to do whatever he wanted at the rest of his lineup, and in particular get someone like Odell Beckham Jr., 8,100, super expensive, fine play, 9.7%. You're just not going to get these type of guys this low owned, so I love that. I'm sure maybe Tyler Boyd thought he would probably come in a little bit lower than this, but his price was, he was at a great price point for his volume, right? 5,800, especially with everyone kind of playing Godwin in that range. Love the Boyd call. It's interesting because there's kind of like slight undertones of other sharp things in his roster construction, right? So Chris Carson, obviously, if the game script was to flip to the Seattle side, which we did kind of expect, right? They were a pretty big favorite in this game. They would just hammer Chris Carson on the ground with a lot of touches. But on the other side of that game, Tyler Boyd, Cincinnati is going to have to throw quite a bit too if it just so happened that Cincinnati did get behind. So I love the little mini Carson Boyd stack because it makes so much sense from kind of trying to think through where the game is going to go. DJ Moore, this is one of the regrets I had, right? So like Curtis Samuel, of course, like I wasn't super pumped about the end result, but at the same time, this situation would have been one that would have made a lot more sense to go to someone like DJ Moore. He's so good in space, significantly lower ownership, 5.6% on him. Even if he doesn't end up getting these 7 catches, the difference in 13.6 points and 6.2 points, really not that big of a deal. But do I think DJ Moore was probably a sharper play? Yeah, because you had to pay up a little bit to be contrarian, right? 5,500 with all these guys in the 4K range that were just such good plays. I love that he did that. Tight end, Austin Hooper, again, just going a little bit lower owned at a position that certainly it matters to try to embrace volatility at times. I'm in on that, especially since he did fade Dalvin Cook, grabbing another piece of that game, a lower owned piece. Sure, if Dalvin Cook would have failed, maybe if Dalvin Cook would have put up the same score as someone like Chubb, Yeah, Austin Hooper, maybe that Atlanta just runs away with this game. 77 yards, 9 receptions. They were just peppering this guy on shorter targets too. I actually kind of love to see that. So that was a nice play at 3,200 for sure if you're going to pay all the way down. And 49ers defense. I would imagine that Jeff did not think that the ownership would be 22%. I think that the millionaire maker ownership around like 4 or 5%. Of course, I didn't think it'd be that low in this tournament. There's a lot of sharp players, but I thought the 49ers would settle around 10%, and it really worked out for him. So he kind of chased me down almost in this tournament too. Jeff was right around the cash line until some of these later games were about halfway through, and the 49ers just started going nuts. I thought he was honestly going to pass me at one point, but really sharp team. Let's see. Can you speak about Cam Newton's fantasy points in the game? I paired him with Moore and just got low points. I did have CMC and min cashed. Yeah, so I do think that Cam Newton was an interesting kind of leverage play, right? Everyone was like kind of worried about his foot from the preseason. Still like the idea that you had there, pairing him with Moore and CMC. Wish I would have done that instead of Curtis Samuel for sure. I just liked the idea of kind of going with the Josh Allen to John Brown for significantly cheaper than DJ Moore and Cam Newton. But yeah, I messed around with a few builds to just fully stack up the KC side. It wasn't something that completely worked out. Honestly, Christian McCaffrey is the only one that hit value, which is not always surprising. But yeah, I think that Cam was fine, especially if you're in kind of a large field tournament, man. Problem with Carolina is such a wide range of outcomes as far as target distribution, hard to pinpoint all the pass catchers. Yeah, no, I think like you said, CMC, his workload's definitely safe, but past that, I think that there's definitely a lot of options over there. Curious to hear your thoughts on Empire Makers too. We know he tends to be more chalky in these small fields, Wentz under 10%. Yeah, let's look at Empire Makers team. I do really like looking at his teams in general. The Empire Maker kind of crew, some of those higher stakes guys that have been around forever playing massive volume. They tend to use the props market quite a bit too to try and make some of these decisions. So yeah, this is a pretty chalky lineup, like you said. He's rolling out one lineup per slate. Know that for a fact. This is a build that I would assume a lot of people ended up on at one point. So the chalky wide receivers, Godwin, Lockett, Westbrook, like probably that combination with maybe someone like Adam Thielen was what a lot of people thought was optimal at the position going into the week. So if you're going to build a cash lineup, I think it's totally fine, or I guess a one lineup approach. And George Kittle, Dalvin Cook, basically, if you weren't going to play CMC and you ended up on Nick Chubb as your third running back, I think that was totally fine. Carson Wentz naked, yeah, sure, I probably don't end up doing that. But 8.3% is a really nice ownership kind of discount you got on him, 5,700. Yeah, I mean, this is a sharp team. 49ers defense, of course, Empire Makers on the sharp defense. That's not surprising whatsoever. Just didn't quite get there, right? He had a couple guys just really underperform. Like some of these, like as soon as the chalk wide receivers, like none of them really went nuts. I knew I was going to have a good day just because, like, regardless of that, if I would have had even just one of John Brown, Deshaun Jackson do well with some sort of, like, as when I say do well, like these high upside guys, like one of them really go off, I was going to be in a great position as soon as some of these other guys, as the cheaper, or I guess more chalky wide receivers, 30, 22, 37%. As soon as one of those guys didn't go nuts, I knew it was going to be a good day. What was the cash line for the tournament? Yeah, let's see how many people actually get paid out in this thing. Okay, so 17th place was the cutoff. So 167.9 was the cash line in this tournament. So what's interesting about this tournament in general is a lot of times you'll see like some of the double ups, even especially the higher stakes MME type double ups in cash games. So say the $25 MME double up, you'll see the cash line is actually pretty similar to some of these smaller field GPPs. So yeah, I think that Empire Maker's approach of going with more of what he thinks is the best plays, it can definitely work in a tournament this small. If you want to learn more about how to become a profitable daily fantasy sports player and better, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner. Be on the lookout for all my DFS content, starting with these videos right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.